Good morning, fifth grade. All right, so the last couple lessons we talked about adding and subtracting fractions, and we talked about how they had to have the same denominator in order to add or subtract them. So I told you that today we were going to be learning something new. Now, it's not a hard topic, a hard concept, but it can be confusing because sometimes we can accidentally think that we're talking about greatest common factor when actually we're talking about least common denominator. So let's dive right in to least common denominators to see what I am talking about. All right, so let's say that we have the fractions 1/3 plus 1/4. Okay, well, it seems like an easy enough fraction to add, but we can't add them because they don't have the same denominator. So we need to find out what the least common denominator is for 1/3 and 1/4. Okay, in order to do that, we need to find the least common multiple of 3 and 4. Because those are the denominators, 3 and 4. Now, what is a multiple? Now, I have been telling you all year, it is so important to learn your multiplication tables, okay? So when we do our 3 multiplication tables and our 4 multiplication tables, we are talking, the answers are all multiples. So the multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, etc. Okay, that's also called skip counting. Okay, those are just the answers to all of our 3 multiplication tables. Okay, the multiplication table for 4, the answers are 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, etc. Those are the answers to our multiplication tables for 4. Okay, again, it's like skip counting. Okay, so those are multiples, multiples of 3 and multiples of 4. Okay, so in order to add or subtract fractions, you have to find out what the common denominator is going to be, and you want to find the least common denominator. Okay, so what is the least, the smallest, common, the one that they have in common, multiple of 3 and 4? Well, let's look. We have 3, 6, 9, 12, 4, 8, 12. Okay, I see 12. When I list the multiples out, I see that 12 is the least common multiple of 3 and 4. Now, are they going to have other common multiples? Yes, like they'll both have 24. They'll both have 32. No, they won't. Sorry, 36. So, but 12 is their least common multiple. All right, stick with me here. So I need to turn 1/3 and 1/4 both into 12ths, okay? Because in order to add them together, they have to have the same denominator. Okay, so I just found out that 12 is the least common denominator for thirds and fourths. So this is what I'm going to do before I add them together. I'm going to turn both of them into 12ths. Now, remember, whenever you are making an equivalent fraction, you have to do the same thing to the top as you do to the bottom, okay? So let's do 1/3 first. Okay, what did I do to 3 in order to get 12? Multiply it by 4. So I have to multiply the numerator by 4 also. So 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/3 equals 4/12. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to the 4th. Okay, what did I do to 4 to get 12? Multiply it by 3. So what do I need to do to the 1? Multiply it by 3, because it's not going to be an equivalent fraction if I don't do the same thing to the top as I do to the bottom. Okay, I don't know if you noticed something, but I ended up multiplying the denominators by each other, right? A lot of times that's going to happen, especially with smaller fractions, okay? If you are in a pinch and you just need to add fractions together in order to make them have the same denominator, you can multiply the denominators together and then do the same thing to each of their numerators. But you're going to end up maybe having to reduce the answer at the end. So let's find the least common denominator today. So you make sure that you have the least common denominator. Okay, so now that we have the least common denominator and we have turned 1/3 and 1/4 into equivalent fractions of 4/12 plus 3/12, let's add them together. Okay, remember when we're adding fractions, we only add the numerators. The denominators stay the same. So 4/12 plus 3/12 equals 7/12. Is that as small as that fraction can get? Is that the smallest, the reduced fraction? Yes, because the greatest common factor of 7 and 12 is 1. Okay? All right, so let's look on your page in your book on page 464. Okay, page 464 is basically exactly what we just talked about. And it says, how can you find the least common denominator of two fractions? To find a common denominator of two fractions, it is helpful to know about multiples. We've been saying this all year. And the least common multiple. You can find the non-zero multiples of any number by multiplying the number by 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. The least common multiple of two numbers is the least number that is a multiple of both numbers. So, in example A, find the least common multiple of 3 and 4. So, we just did that. Okay, so the least common denominator of 1/8 and 5/12. Okay, so let's do that together. Example B, find the least common denominator of 1/8 and 5/12. Well, the first thing we need to do is find the least common multiple of the least common denominator or the least common multiple of 8 and 12. Okay, so remember we start multiplying by 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on until we get a common multiple. So 8, 16, 24, 32, and let's do our 12s, because I already know, because I know my multiplication tables, that I think I know what the least common denominator is going to be. So 12, 24, I don't even need to move on. Okay, so what is the least common denominator of 8 and 12? 24. Okay, so if I'm going to add 1/8 and 5/12, let's see how to do it. Okay, so 1/8 plus 5/12. Okay, so my least common denominator is 24. Okay, so let's start with 1/8. Okay, so what do I do to 8? Sorry, what do I do to 8 to get 24? Yes, multiply it by 3. 8 times 3 is 24, so I need to do the same thing to the top. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, what about 5 twelfths? What do I do to 12 to get 24? 12 times 2 is 24, so 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, so now I can add them together. Okay, 3 24ths plus 10 24ths equals 13 24ths, and that is the smallest that it can be because 13 and 24, their least common denominator is 1. Okay? All right, are we catching on at all? I hope so. Okay. So let's look at check on page 465. Okay? It says find the least common multiple of 5 and 12. Find the least common multiple of 5 and 12. Okay, I know for this one, I'm probably going to have to multiply a little bit. Okay, let's say the multiples of 5 together. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. I know in my head that that could be it. 65, etc. Okay, let's do 12. A hint is that it actually could be helpful to do the larger number first because you're probably going to find the least common multiple first on that. So if you do the larger number first, then when you do the smaller number, you're probably going to hit it fast. You're going to be able to see what it is faster. Okay, so 12. 12, 24, 36, 48, 60. Okay, so I was right. Okay, what is the least common multiple of 5 and 12? 60. Okay, so that one just happened to be the denominators multiplied by each other. So 5 and 12, 5 times 12 is 5 times 12 is 60. Okay? All right. So let's look at number 2. Okay? It says find the least common denominator for each pair. Okay, so we're not changing the whole fraction. We're just finding the least common denominator for each pair. Let's do the odd ones. And this is not your homework, so we're just going to do the odd ones together. 2/7 and 1/3. Okay, 7 and 3. What do you think the least common denominator for 7 and 3 is? Yes, 21. Okay, number 5, 8 and 6. What do you think the least common denominator for 8 and 6 is? It's going to be 24. Okay, let's look at number 7. It says in exercise 2, Tanya said that since 10 is a multiple of 2, then 10 is the least common denominator. Is this true for any pair of numbers where one number is a multiple of the other? Okay, so that was kind of confusing, but that's because we need to look at exercise 2. Okay, it says exercise 2. Oh, was it exercise 2? Okay, 7/10 and 1/2. Okay, in exercise 2, Tanya said that since 10 is a multiple of 2, then 10 is the least common denominator. Is this true for any pair of numbers where one number is a multiple of the other? Okay, it says yes, the least non-zero multiple of any number is the number itself. So that number is a multiple of another number, then it is the least common multiple. Okay, so like for 2 and 10, you can't get any lower than 2. So the least common multiple, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 10 multiplied by itself, or by 1, is 10. Okay, so the least common multiple is going to be 10. Okay, that just makes it easier. All right, so for homework today, for Thursday, you're going to do, I believe, make sure I write down the right thing, You're going to do 465A odd, just A, okay, just A today. All right, and if you understand it, it won't take you long. If you having a hard time, please watch it over again. Again, remember, Khan is an amazing resource. Okay, so you're going to do 365A. All right, so for tomorrow, you are going to be at you're going to be doing 468 odd. Okay, so let's quickly look at 466 and 467. Okay, so in 466 and 467, you are doing the same thing that we just talked about. You're finding the least common denominator, and then you're changing the fractions to have the least common denominator. Remember, you have to do the same thing to the top that you do to the bottom, and then adding or subtracting them together. Let's look at example B, 5/6 minus 8/15. 5/6 minus 8/15. 5/6 minus 8/15. Okay, so first we have to find the least common denominator for 6 and 15ths, and that is going to be 30. Okay, so 6 times what equals 30? 6 times 5. So we have to do the same thing to the top. 5 by 5 is 25. 15 times what equals 30? 2. So 8 times 2 is 16. So now we need to subtract 25 30ths minus 16 30ths, which comes out to 9 30ths. Is that as small of a fraction as you can do? No. Well, I can see just by looking at it that both of those are divisible by 3. So let's divide the top and the bottom by 3 to reduce it to the lowest terms. Okay, so 9 divided by 3 is 3. 30 divided by 3 is 10. So 9 30ths equals 3 tenths. All right, so that's the answer for example B. Okay, let's do example C. Now this is 3 different numbers added together. 3 different numbers added together. So I have to find the least common denominator for all 3 of them. Okay, so 3/8 plus 1/6 plus 3/4. Okay, so just by looking at it, I can tell that the least common denominator is going to be 24. Okay, so I have to figure out, I have to turn all of these fractions into 24ths. Okay, so remember, same thing to the top as you do to the bottom. So 8 times 3 is 24, so 3 times 3 is 9. 6 times 4 is 24, so 1 times 4 is 4. 4 times 6 is 24, so 3 times 6 is 18. So now I can add them together because they all have the same denominator. Okay, so 9 plus 4 is 13. 13 plus 18 is 31. Okay, so 31 24ths. Okay, So what do I have to do to 31/24? Is that a proper fraction? It is not. So remember, in order to make it into a mixed number, I'm going to divide the top by the bottom. So 31 divided by 24 equals 1, with how many left over? 7. 7/24. Is 7/24 the lowest fraction it can be? Yes. All right, so all three of those added together comes out to 1 and 7/24. Now it's a lot of steps, but they're easy steps once you get the hang of it. Okay, so you're going to do page 468, I believe also A odd. Yes, 468 A odd for your homework for tomorrow. All right, I will see you in a minute.